Hello everyone, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's video, I'll be showing you how to make these fall leaf tote bags. This is a bag made for intermediate crocheters, but with step-by-step, very easy instructions. Here's a list of materials that you'll need. Of course, you can adjust your hook size and your yarn size if you want it thicker or thinner, but aside from that, stitch markers are optional. The rest you will need to have for this piece. I also have a free written pattern up on my Instagram right now at Faith.Wisest. It's also up on Facebook if you use that platform. Let's get right on into the video. For step 1, you have the option of doing either a chain ring or a magic ring. So I'm going to show you the chain ring first because I know a lot of people don't like the magic ring, and this can also help a lot of you that are newer as well. So you're going to start with just a regular old slip knot. You can make it however you want, but I'm used to making it with that little like half hourglass shape that I'm showing you here, just pulling the bottom loop through and creating my slip knot. Now is a good time to mention, if you are totally new and need a little extra help, please send me a DM on Instagram or just a comment below and I can explain this all even more in depth than it already is. So after your slip knot is done, you're going to continue by making a chain of just 4. That is the slow step of making a chain where you just yarn over and pull through. And after you have 4 of them total, you should have a small piece that looks like this. Also, sorry for the shaking, that is my dog jumping on the couch. So once you have your 4 chains like this, you want to identify where that first chain is, which is right here, and push your hook back through there. You will have 2 loops on your hook, and all you need to do now is slip stitch them together. So simply just yarn over and pull that straight through. That's going to create a small little ring on the inside, and that is where you'll be putting your double crochets for the chain ring itself. You'll just make your chain of 2, and then you can progress from here. Now, the other option is to make a magic ring, and this is going to look and feel a whole lot nicer, so I really recommend doing it this way if you have the capability of doing so. Starting off really slow, you want to use all of your fingers to kind of hold the yarn in place around your middle finger and your index finger. I then use my pinky to hold it in place from there because I want to have a nice tight grip on my yarn while I make the ring itself. What you're going to do is take your hook and put it underneath of that left side here to grab the other piece of yarn from underneath like so. Twist your yarn to create that little loop, push it down, and then just chain 1, and that is exactly how you make a magic ring. I chain 2 because we're going to be making double crochets here. You can then remove it, and from there you will actually have a functioning magic ring. Now, regardless of which start you did, you are going to need to place 8 double crochets inside of your ring, whether that be the small chain ring or the actual magic ring itself. So to make a double crochet, you're going to start by yarning over, and instead of pulling through, you're actually going to push your hook back through the main loop. From there, you're going to yarn over and pull that straight through like this, and now you'll have 3 loops on your hook. Push your yarn to yarn over, and then pull it through just 2 of those loops. Then you'll left with 2, push through again, pull it all the way out, and there should be 1 loop left on your hook so you can continue. Again, taking it nice and slow for those who don't know how to make these, start by yarning over, push it through your main hook, and then pull it all the way through. You'll have 3 loops on your hook, then just continue yarning over and pulling through until you have all of that done for your double crochet. Now, like I said, you want to have 8 total, so I'm just going to take it a little bit slowly here as we go through the rest, just because it's important for you guys to kind of see what I'm doing. While this video is made for people that have a little bit more experience in crochet than a complete beginner, obviously it is still beginner friendly, so again, please just let me know if you need any help as we go throughout the rest of this video. Once you have all 8 of your double crochets, if you are on a chain ring, all you'll have to do is slip stitch your colors together. But if you're on a magic ring like this, you'll notice that it kind of looks like a fan as opposed to a circle. Just pull your tail nice and tight, and that will tighten it up into that little circle, and you can do your slip stitching from here. So what I always do is I count along the tops of the double crochets themselves, and those little braided pieces to find the one that I made first. I'm then going to push my hook through that first double crochet, leaving me with 2 loops on my hook. Pull that tail end out of the way and go back in with your main piece of yarn to create a slip stitch between the 2 of these. You're essentially just going to yarn over, pull it through both of the loops on your hook. And then all you gotta do here is get ready for your next color switch, but your immediate circle itself is done. Once you have your base circle, we're gonna take this really slowly and I'm gonna show you how to actually make the color switch so you can start your next row. So I like to start by just trimming the ends to be a little bit more manageable because it can start to get confusing if you have these really long tails. I'm going to be using brown for the base of my bag. So I'm just going to use my 2 fingers and hold them in a straight line like this to make it really easy to chain with that yarn afterwards. You want to make sure you give yourself some slack, and now you're just going to simply pull it through like you're making a chain with your new color. Tighten all of the loose strands from here. That would be the one on your magic ring, the red that you just finished with, and then the brown that you just used, or again, whatever colors you're using. And all you gotta do from there is create 2 chains, now just using your brown yarn. So, very simply, you should know how to do your chains by now. You're just adding 2 of them to essentially close off row 1 or to start row 2, however you wanna envision that. Once your chains are done, we are going to begin our 4-time pattern repeating. So for your first bit here, you are going to need to make 2 double crochets into the first stitch. So you're kind of doing a small increase here. I just want to zoom you in so you can see a little bit better. So find that first stitch of the row. It would be the one you slip stitch into in your last step. Into there, you want to start by placing 1 double crochet totally normally. Again, you're looking with the brown pieces now, so you're going to have your 3 loops on your hook like this, and just remember to yarn through 2 and yarn through 2 more. Instead of moving into the next stitch for the next double crochet, place your next double crochet into the exact same one. This is called an increase. We'll be doing many of them throughout the video to make our rows bigger each turn. Once those 2 are done, you're going to place 1 normal chain in between them. That's how you're going to create your actual corners. Now into the next stitch, you'll be placing 2 more double crochets for another increase. From this point on, you are going to take that pattern and repeat it 4 times. So that does not mean you do another chain after that little increase here. You are just going to move right into your next stitch, adding a 2 double crochet increase, the exact same way we did it before. So as we're just going to be continuing this part around, I'm going to let you guys listen to some music real quick while I finish the rest of this row. And again, if you guys ever need help, please feel free to leave me a comment on here or just reach out to me in any way and we'll discuss it. But I figured the easiest thing for you would be to watch this part of the video nice and slow. And what we'll be doing for the rest of these repeating 4 sort of rows is I'm going to show you the long explanation of the first portion, then just without speaking, show you that part again, and then we'll skip through the rest of the row. So enjoy. Now, once you have finished all 4 of your little corners here, it helps to block things out, but that's an expensive part of crochet that not a lot of people have, so you can just pull your corners out like this to sort of form your own little square. Now what you want to do is find the first double crochet that you made and put your slip stitch right into there to close it off and have that full frame square part of your granny square done. And just know that we'll be doing this to finish off every single row that we make from this point on, so just be ready with your slip stitches. From there, you'll have this really cute little baby square, and we're going to continue on to the next row. So instead of doing a chain, which a lot of people do, I think that disrupts the pattern. So what we're going to do instead is give a little bit of slack at the end of our row here, and we're just going to start making double crochets right into the next stitch that way. So find that first square that you went into, or your first stitch you went into of the square, and then you'll start by making just 2 double crochets, one after the other. That will take you up to your corner. And just so you see, I pointed out that little spot there. That is where you'll be doing your slip stitches into later. If it helps and you have stitch markers, I would recommend using one in that spot. Now, once you've reached the corner, we're going to be doing 1 brown double crochet, but I want you to watch because we're going to stop about halfway through. So you want to do is start your double crochet normally, go through that first loop, and when you have 2 left on your hook like this, get your second color. For me, I'm using that pinkish brownish color here that I'm going to be showing you. And what we're going to do is our color switch the exact same way we did it before, minus the cutting of the brown yarn, because we're going to be going back and forth between the two. So pull up and make sure you give yourself a ton of slack with this new color as well, so that way when we're tying our ends up later, it doesn't make any difference. And what you're going to do next is just add 1 pink double crochet into the corner, doing the same thing to leave that second half of it open. And the reason, as you can see, the top of that double crochet is brown, but we're starting off pink with this one. That's why I do our color switches in this fashion. So insert through, do your first loop and pull through the first 2. And instead of pulling through the next 2, you're going to switch back to your brown. Be really careful to not end up like switching your colors over too much, or you're going to end up knotting them. And also make sure to keep all of your work behind the square so you don't end up with any of your little strands in the front. So again, finish your next double crochet, and like I said, you can see that that is a perfectly done top. And next you're just going to do another brown crochet into that hole. This time you'll finish it fully because we're not switching back to pink. And what you want to do is, now that your increasing corner is done, pull them all to the side so you don't skip that little stitch here. Next up, you're just going to be doing your 2 double crochets into this hole, 1 here, and 1 right afterwards. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to let you guys watch me do this next segment here, and then we'll skip to the end of this row to close it up. At the end of that row, you want to find the first double crochet that you went into so you can do another slip stitch to kind of finish off that row. So just insert your hook nice and straight through, do your slip stitch, make sure that your square is totally even, and then give yourself a little bit of slack before we start the next row. You want to make sure that everything is even. What we'll be doing in this row is 3 back-to-back brown double crochets and then placing an increase into that last stitch that we use. So you're doing this the exact same way we did before. Do 1 double crochet into that first stitch with the slack and no chaining. Then into the next stitch here, you'll be doing 1 more double crochet. And then into the following stitch, you'll do 1 double crochet normally, and then add a second brown into that one, so that way we can make our increase. Because we're going to be switching back to pink though, you do not want to finish off that double crochet. You just want to grab your pink yarn so you can very quickly and easily move to your next one. Now into that center hole here, the pink one that we just made, you want to add 2 more pink double crochets for a small increase into that one. And then instead of finishing off that second pink double crochet, you want to pull through, switching back to your brown, so that way you can go back to your brown increase in the next one. And as you can see, what we've now done is we've made the stem of what will be a leaf a little bit thicker progressively instead of moving in like this really big triangular position. Once you have done your increase, you are just going to do 2 more double crochets, and then you will repeat this all the way around. So same as before, once your piece is done, continue across until you finish this part of the project. We are now going to close up row 4 the exact same way that we've been doing it in each row. This won't change throughout all of your squares. So you're just going to do a normal slip stitch going into the very top of that first double crochet that you made, give yourself a little bit of slack, and we can now move on to row 5. And this is where we're just going to be building up that like 2-piece stem. So you want to start by doing 4 double crochets in your brown color. Now after you've done your 4th here, you want to place a 5th brown stitch into that first of the pink stitches in the previous row. This is because we want our increase to have 1 pink and 1 brown. So to start with your 1 brown like this, switch on over to your pink, and then you will place a pink double crochet into that exact same stitch that we just went into. Now you're going to be doing 1 pink double crochet first into the next stitch, and switching back to brown to finish that increase with the brown double crochet instead. And this is going to make it so it's even with the last row while still having an increase to that corner and making the row bigger. Now we're just going to repeat that first bit here of doing 4 more brown double crochets. And remember, don't pull too tight on any of your yarn. It's important that if you do, it's going to fold up your granny square, so you want to keep everything pretty loose in the back. But so long as your stem looks like this, you're doing it right. Just finish off this portion here with 4 more of those brown double crochets before you repeat everything 4 times. Also, my apologies, my voice sounds like I was just asleep because I was just asleep, but hopefully it still sounds pretty good in the audio. From here, I'm going to let you guys watch the rest of this part of the video, and then I'll meet you at the end of the row. We are finishing up row 5 here, just with another slip stitch and then giving us some slack. And as you guys can see, our piece is starting to get pretty big. So we have 1 row left for row 6 here, and it's a little bit different than the ones we've been doing because we're building up the base of the leaves. So you're going to just start with 3 regular double crochets in the brown color, being ready to do your color switch into that 3rd double crochet. So here we are, switching to pink on our 3rd double crochet here, and you'll notice that there is 2 more brown stitches in the row previously before reaching that little stem. Like I said, that's because we want to build up the base of the leaves, so when we're sewing the rest of the 4 corners onto it, it's going to make that really cute leaf pattern. So you'll do those 2 stitches normally here, and then you want to do 2 increases into each of those stitches that were already a part of the stem. So essentially it's 2 pink, then a pink increase, then another pink increase, then 2 more pink stitches. If it helps you to think of it this way, it's essentially going to be 8 pink stitches in a row for each of those corners. So you'll have your increases and the 2 on the sides adding up to be 8 total. Switch back to your brown yarn after that 8th pink stitch here, and then you're just going to finish up with 3 more brown double crochets before repeating the row 4 times. And as simple as that, you have finished your first granny square. We are going to do one more slip stitch into that corner piece up here, and then instead of giving it some slack, we actually will be chaining one this time. That's just because we actually need to cut the yarn, and we want to make sure it's knotted in place while doing so. So I just give myself a pretty small tail here, pull straight up to knot the yarn in place, and now we're just going to flip it to the back to make sure that we cut all those loose ends. As you can see on the back here, there's a lot to take in. We need to make sure that we cut that pink yarn so that way nothing is connected to the skeins anymore. And now you just want to tie up or weave in your ends however you like. There's a lot of different ways you can do this. I typically just tie mine off to be pretty tiny and then cut them. It's also worth noting that if you want to add a lining to your bag, now is the time to do it, not after you've sewn it all together. So I would do a little bit of a lining in each of these because it'll make it a lot easier to sew each piece together. If you just want to cut every single piece of those like overlapping pink strands or brown strands, cut them and tie them off now because it's going to get really hard when we sew the piece together. But as you can see, making each of the granny squares isn't too difficult here. It just takes a little bit of time, but if you were able to get this first one done, you are more than equipped to finish the rest of the bag. So also, you see me use my hook there. I do that to make sure that the knot goes into the back of the square and doesn't stand on the edge of the corners because that's just a pain and a hassle when you're actually tying and sewing your pieces up. So after I have all my ends actually like tailored into the piece, I just take a piece of a scissor here and I just cut every little bit of yarn. I just do not have the time to actually weave everything in, plus you won't see it at the end of the day anyways. But again, if this was something I was going to be selling, I would probably finish off my ends or put a layer of fabric on the back. Once all of your ends are done, you're going to make one more of this style of granny square. These are just going to be the middles for both sides of your bag. It's important to label it with color if you want to, like I did red on the middles here, because when we do our other ones, we're going to be using another color. So just so you guys know, the yellow pieces here have the first 3 rows the same, and I'm going to meet you at row 4 to show you the differences in these two patterns. So for our yellow granny squares is what I'm going to call this, I'm meeting you here to close off row 3 and begin row 4. So the slip stitching is going to be exactly the same. Find the very first double crochet that you went into and do a slip stitch and give yourself a little bit of slack. This is where the discrepancy is going to be because we don't want a stem in this row. So you're going to start by just doing 2 brown double crochets here and making sure that we do our increases into the corner stitches. We're not going to be switching to pink yet though, so just follow with me here. Do your first brown double crochet into this corner stitch, then switch right to your pink to place your second double crochet. As you see written in the pattern, it's a little bit different. So it says increase 1 brown, 1 pink. That's just what I mean when you're doing one of each color into the increase. So you'll do your first pink into here, and then add a full pink increase into that pink stitch in the previous row. So just your next stitch is going to have 2 pinks into the same one. From there, you're going to do 1 more pink into the next stitch, but be prepared to switch back to brown because we want to do the second half of that increase in our brown color. And this, just to make it make sense in your brain, is going to be the points of the leaves. After you've done your next double crochet, you'll see that we now have 4 in like that pink row, and then you're going to come back here to double crochet with your brown 2 more times. To make it make sense again in your mind visually, it'll be 4 pinks and then 6 browns in between them. Alright, so moving on, we are going to close up row 4 again with a slip stitch and a little bit of slack, same as we've been doing. Row 5 is where things get a little confusing, so I want to make sure we take it nice and slow. You are going to make your first double crochet brown but leave it open because we are switching straight to pink afterwards. So once you have your first part of your double crochet done, switch over to your pink and place one pink double crochet into the next stitch, leaving that one open as well because we'll be switching right back to brown afterwards. As you go back in here with your brown, once again, be ready to switch right back to pink after. So we'll do our one brown double crochet, going back to our pink, and this time we're going to stay pink for a minute, so don't worry about going right back to the next color. We are from there going to add in a couple more pink double crochets, so doing one first, then one increase into the middle stitch here, and then another increase into the stitch afterwards. So this is basically making it so the bottom of your leaf has 3 total points. That's why we're going back and forth between pink and brown and pink and brown. So once you are finished with your next pink here, you want to switch back to your brown and then go in again with a brown double crochet, leaving it open so we can switch back to our pink afterwards. Go back into your pink so we can do that other point here. That will basically make it so you have 3 points. Then you'll go back in with your brown for 2 brown double crochets before switching back. So again, you're going to repeat that entire pattern into the next corner and repeat that around 4 times. And just again to let everybody know, I'm always there for comments or DMs, so if you're stuck on any of this, please send me a message. I also wanted to show you guys what to do if you make a mistake because I made one here. So there's only 5 brown double crochets in that previous row because it looks like I missed my increase. So what I'm going to do to make up for it in the row that's up here is just add in that extra double crochet instead of losing a spot here. So I'm just doing a pink increase instead of doing a pink into the next stitch, then switching back to my brown to go into the stitch afterwards. This ends up basically making no difference in the size of your piece. It just makes sure that all of the stitches are where they need to be instead of you having to totally undo a row. So remember, mistakes can be very easily rectified throughout this entire process. This will look exactly the same as your other squares will. To close up your next row here, you're just going to do another slip stitch into that first double crochet and give yourself some slack before starting row 6. For this row, we are going to start by doing 2 brown double crochets before switching back to our pink. So essentially into that top of the pink one in the last row, and then what this is going to end up looking like is that diagonal afterwards with the next pink stitch. So you're going to do 3 pink stitches in a row before doing any increases, and you'll notice right off the bat that it looks like all these pieces are connected to each other, which is exactly what we want to see. From there, we are going to do our increasing stitches into those corner stitches with 1 pink increase followed by another. After your 2 increases, you're just going to do 2 pink double crochets because we're going to do a decrease into the next stitch. So I'm going to show you quickly what that looks like before I do a slower version. But essentially, you're just going into the back of one stitch and out the one in front of it like so. But of course, don't worry, I am going to slow it down and show you guys again if you don't know how to do a decrease. So simply start your double crochet the exact same way you normally do it, yarning over and inserting through. Now come out the stitch next to it and finish your double crochet going through both of those loops like this, leaving it open to switch back to brown. What this is going to do is create that diagonal here without having any separation between that little pink piece that we did in the last row and the rest of the body we did here. Into that same stitch we just did the decrease in, you're going to place another brown double crochet, so that way we don't lose any of the length of the piece. We just wanted to make sure the stitch is connected to each other. And you're just going to keep repeating this pattern all the way around. It should look like you have 4 of these brown double crochets in between your giant pink corners. So I'll meet you again at the end. I've zoomed you guys out a bit so we can finish the row over here, just the exact same way we did it the first time, cutting your yarn, making sure that all of your little pieces are behind everything and cut up. And once you're done, you'll be having the second variation of your granny squares totally done with. So what you guys are going to need here is to make 11 total of these squares. And I'm going to show you the total layout afterwards, but essentially what you want to have is pieces that move together like this, so that way the leaves can form themselves around those center squares, the ones with the red. So regardless of what colors you chose, make sure that you have 11 total of the yellow ones and 2 total of the red ones before we move on to sewing everything fully together. This is the layout that we're going to start with for sewing. Take a screenshot here or just pause it until you've lined everything up. And as you can see, the leaves have actually optical illusioned themselves into where they need to be. And I want to quickly show you how to sew these pieces together so you can do that throughout the rest of your piece. So for those of you who have not sewn things with a darning needle before, you are simply just going to line up the pieces you want next to each other. I'm doing 2 yellow pieces first, and I'm going to show you this with a bright yellow yarn, which is not the color I'm going to use because you will be able to see this. So, taking a darning needle, you do not need anything fancy, you can use any size that you have. You are going to string it through with a very long piece of yarn. I would recommend using the same color that you did for the leaves. I do switch to pink after I do this row, but again, I just want to show you with a more vibrant color what this actually looks like. So after you're done threading your needle, which just takes a quick second, sometimes I put lotion on the end of the yarn to keep all of these sides together. You want to make sure that your corners are totally lined up. As you can see in my piece here, we're pretty much exactly even with those 2 squares. So I'm first going to start right going left, but I want to make sure that I've counted every stitch. So I want my little stitch markers here to be on the 5th stitch of both rows. It's important to count because if your pieces are not lined up, it's going to look really janky and not as puffy with your final product. So just make sure you count and go into the tops of the exact same stitch in both rows. So that's what I'm using this blue stitch marker for here. If you don't have stitch markers, you can use a bobby pin, or realistically you don't have to use anything. You can just count and take it nice and slow. But I do think stitch markers make it easier, especially if you're a beginner or just somebody who has a harder time lining things up and keeping track of numbers. I think I got my whole set of darning needles and stitch markers for $16 on Amazon. If not, it might have been cheaper. Now moving on, once I know that everything is actually even and not just by sight, I'm going to take my darning needle, not having tied up any of the sides, and just starting to weave it through the backs of each stitch only. We're going to stitch this very carefully, just going up through both of these stitches first, and then pulling the yarn really far back, so that way you only have the very end of that tail in here. You'll probably need a longer piece than what I'm using if you're going to go through the entire piece at once, but if you're just going to take it one line at a time, take about the same amount of yarn I have here. Now continue, this time going top to bottom, going through only the back stitches, because this is what's going to give you that very nicely sewn finish without the pieces just sitting on top of each other. You want to have your bag be a little puffy and more spacious, so to do so we need to make sure we're going through only the backs of the stitches. This also, while it may not perfectly hide your stitch, is going to make it a lot less noticeable. Now of course I'm using neon yellow yarn right now, but when you're using your actual color you will not notice it nearly as much. I have some slower videos on just how to sew and crochet, so if you need the link to that, please let me know, but I'm assuming you guys have a general grasp on it before doing this tutorial. So as you can see, if you flip it over, you will notice the yellow stitching. That's why I recommend going back to your pink. And what you want to do after you go through each of these lines here, remove your stitch markers, and I'm going to show you how to knot your yarn in place. So taking one end here, I'm going to start on that shorter right piece that I left. I'm going to use my hook to actually knot it onto the rest of the piece. Going through only the backs of this piece so it doesn't show up in the front, I'm just going to make a very small knot by pulling through like a small chain, and then going through just the end, pulling it all the way up. That's just the simplest way to make a knot here. Now if you're really paranoid, or if you know you're going to be having like a lot of stuff in this bag, I recommend double knotting or even triple knotting to make sure that this does not come undone, no matter how much weight is in your bag. And like I mentioned before, you can cut your yarn here and do that to both sides, or if you're a little bit more experienced in sewing, you can take this all the way around your entire piece without having to even cut your yarn. When your piece is all sewn up on the back side, it'll look something like this, and now you want to fold your ends over to do the other side as well. So this is the pattern. I'm trying to take it nice and slow, but it is hard to hold the camera and film while I'm doing this at the same time. So I'm folding those main like hanging off pieces over themselves, and then the rest of the points I'm just folding in half to create what is essentially the shape of a bag. It kind of looks like a heart, like a weird deformed heart, and then I'm going to place that last red one in the center here. This is what the bag looks like now that I have stitch markers on it, and I'm just flipping it inside out because remember, we want all of these stitches to be on the back of the bag. While it may be a bit trickier to sew this side, just because you actually can't lay it flat, the pieces have to be together, the pattern itself is exactly the same. We're just going into the backs of all the stitches to line up the stitch markers with themselves. I also recommend maybe adding 1 or 2 extra stitches to each of the corners, just to make sure you don't have any little holes in your bag there. But as you can see, I'm just picking a random corner to start with, going through that corner piece a couple times to make that little knot, and then same thing going in the backs of each stitch, one at a time until I'm all the way around. These are a little bit easier to do 2 lines at a time because they are essentially in like little triangles. When you are done here, leave your bag inside out because we first need to make sure all of our ends are cut and sewn in or tied in, the same way we did on the backs of each of those granny squares. So you, depending on how many times you cut your yarn throughout this process, might only have like 4 of these pieces to weave in, but you might also have like a ton of them, depending on just how many pieces of yarn that you used. So for me, I did most of this, and I think 2 or 3 goes on the front, and like less than that on the back. I'm using that same method of using the hook to tie knots in here, making sure that I pull everything really far down. And again, if you hate the way that these look, you can cut each individual of those like overlapping yarns, or you can just put a piece of lining over the back. All we have left to do is make and attach the handle or the strap itself. So what I'm doing is going to those top 2 corners and marking off with my stitch markers 4 double crochets over on each side. I'm going for a wider strap because I know this bag is going to get some use and I really want it to be pretty heavy duty. So that's why we're doing 4 on either side, and you'll see how thick the strap itself is going to be, or you probably saw it already in the thumbnail of the video. And once again, these stitch marker steps are totally optional. You don't have to do them, but if you want them, they're great, and if you have a bobby pin instead of a stitch marker, that works too. I'm going to be starting my strap using the pink yarn and just a simple slip knot because we're just making essentially a giant rectangle. So continuing, after we do our slip knot, we're using that exact same hook and just making a long chain. Now I find 65 chains to be a perfect amount for this, but if you want a longer or a shorter strap, you can adjust as needed. I would not do less than 55 or more than 75 or you're going to get some wonky proportions. Once you have finished your chain, you will end up with a nice long piece like this. And what you want to do here is make half double crochets down instead of regular double crochets. So skip the last stitch that you made and get ready to make your half double crochets into the one following. To make a half double crochet, you are just going to start off like a regular double crochet, yarning over and inserting through the loop you want to go into. From there, you're going to yarn over again and pull through, and this time instead of going through 2 and then 2 more, you are just going to yarn over once and pull through all 3. The reason we are switching this up is because these are a little bit more sturdy than the double crochets, which are going to be a little stretchier. And what you want to do here as you make your half double crochets is take it all the way down, and you will end up with a total of 64, one less than the amount of chains that you made. That's just because of that first chain that we skipped in this process. Once you are done with this row, I will show you how to do a color switch. And honestly, you can change up the colors of the strap as much as you'd like, but this is just going to be the explanation of the exact pattern that I use. At the end, when you are on your last half double crochet, instead of yarning over and pulling through all 3, yarn over and pull through with your brown yarn instead. Also notice again, small mistake where I pulled through all of it. No biggie, I just readjust my hook and then take a longer strand of the brown yarn. I'm going to tighten all of my pieces like this and not cut anything, so I'm going to be using a little bit more of these colors. So this stays exactly the same for the rest of this piece, where you're just going to do a chain of 1, turn your work all the way over to the other side, and then begin half double crocheting all the way across this row with your brown yarn. The half double crochets stay exactly the same, and I'm going to show you at the end of this row what to do when you're at the other end, so that way you don't miss out on any stitches. To give you a small example of what this row should look like, when you have a couple crochets in, it'll look a little bit like this, almost like they're interlocking with the other color. At the end of your row, you want to make sure that if you have that little bulb, you go into the last half double crochet like this, so that way it's a straight line up and down. From here, I'm not going to be doing a color switch, I'm just going to crochet 1, turn my work over, and then go all the way down for another row of brown half double crochets. Now once I reach the other side with this color, I'm going to cut all these off because we're going to be needing to switch a little bit more. I'm going to switch to the yellow yarn here to have an accent row down the middle of my strap, but of course you don't have to do this, or you can use any color that you have. Tighten up your yarn, do your chain of just 1, and then you're just going to half double crochet all the way down the other side. And of course, customization is key, so if you wanted this one in red or in a different color entirely, feel free to do so. Now after you finish this row, you want to follow all those steps that I just did to do 2 more brown rows and then 1 more pink row, just so that way you have them even on both sides. Once your strap is done, you're going to come back to those double crochet stitches that you put your stitch markers in earlier, or again just to the top of the bag. It's super important to make sure that you line this part up perfectly and that you don't cut your pink yarn after you make your last row of the strap. You would just instead want to do 1 singular chain, so that way it's easier to line everything up without unraveling the rest of your piece. Go into that 4th stitch over and make a slip stitch there, and now you'll be able to line up your strap totally and completely, so that way you can sew everything on using your hook this time. I'm essentially just making single crochets here, inserting my hook through both the front of the bag and the front of the strap, pulling through, and then crocheting across. These single crochets are going to make it a really strong hold from the strap to the bag itself. This is my personal favorite way of attaching things together. I think it's a really good skill to know when you're making like strong heavy-duty pieces. But you just now want to go all the way across, making sure to not have any holes in this part of the piece, so just taking it one at a time all the way across so your strap is connected. Once you reach the end here, you might just want to pull your stitch marker out first, or you can just wait until afterwards if you're used to using a hook like this. When you're done, you'll remove the little obstacle in your way before we can finish off this part of the strap. What I like to do is add 1 slip stitch into the stitch afterwards without going back into the strap, just to make sure it's connected to the bag. I'm then going to chain 1 and cut my yarn before pulling through to knot this piece in place. Make sure that everything is totally connected. All these little pieces hanging out either need to be sewn in, knotted down, or just pushed out of the way so that way you can't unravel your bag. It should be pretty tight since you use single crochets to sew it all together, but you also don't want to see them, especially if this is a bag that you're like making for someone or you're making for a fair. You want everything totally out of the way so people don't think it looks any like cheapy or tacky at all. So I'm just using my hook here to neatly pack this all out of the way. And then I'm just going to go back in with my scissors to trim everything down so it doesn't look like you can see it when you're just using your bag. When you're done, we're going to repeat all of this to the other side, but I want you guys to make sure that you do not twist the strap around or else it's going to have that like weird loop in it that you just simply cannot get rid of. So this is me flipping my entire bag over to the other side and making sure my strap is lined up with the other stitch markers on the other side. Because your yarn is not connected this time around, what you're going to do is create another slip knot with your pink yarn. We're going to do everything exactly the same, it's just this small extra step of having to reattach the yarn to the bag. So I'm going to put my hook through the slip knot like this, and then go through both the stitch marker and the very corner of the strap like this. Once I'm through the corner stitch, I'm just going to make a slip stitch all the way through. And if it gets caught like this and you don't feel like fixing it, just make a single crochet through that. Essentially, you just want to make sure that you have a nice, tight connection between the bag and the strap on that corner piece there. And now to actually sew it across, we are going to do this the exact same way we did it the first time, just going through one stitch at a time with single crochets. This, in my opinion, is one of the most useful skills to take from this video, mainly just because it is the best way to connect your pieces together if you're not too worried about it being a little bulky. I think that having a nice, strong strap is really good if it's for pieces that you're selling because it lets people know how like sturdy everything that you have is. You can give them a demonstration by like pulling on the connection and showing them that it doesn't stretch at all because people hate when their bags stretch out too much. Once you are back at your stitch marker, you are going to just pull all these pieces out of the way so you don't get anything trapped and you don't go through the wrong spots. It's not uncommon to like think you went through the strap of the bag, but you actually just like pushed a piece out of the way. So make sure that you really are going through each individual stitch here. You can end it with just a chain, or again, you can go into the next piece over to have that extra connection to make sure that everything is nice and strapped down. You'll just do your chain 1 and cut your yarn. And once again, you want to make sure that everything is tight and pulled out of the way, so that way you have a bag with no strands hanging out, same thing I said before. I'm just going to pull all of my stitch markers out of the way and make sure that they're all put away because losing them is truly a pain. But once everything is the way it needs to be, you can go back in with your hook and start like re-sewing in all of those ends. You want to make sure that they're all pulled to the bottom as well because it's better to hide them in the bag than it is to hide them in the strap, since the strap is going to be a lot more noticeable. If your pieces are a little longer like this, it might even just be easier to tie them together like we did on the backs of the granny squares. This just saves you an extra second or two before you cut all of your pieces off and throw them off to the side. But again, if you enjoy the hook method more, making knots into the bag that way, go ahead and just use your hook, which is what I'm going to be doing for some of the smaller pieces still. Once you're done, you are just going to flip your bag inside out, and you are totally done with your piece. Thank you guys all so much for watching today's video. I really hope that you enjoyed, and if you did, please check out some of my other tutorials. I upload one giant crochet tutorial once a month, and throughout the weeks I add tons of shorts and a video on the weekends, usually in between Friday and Sunday. I will see you all next week. Thank you again. Bye-bye, everyone.